Museum of Innocence is both a novel and a museum I did. The novel is about the story of a man who is so much in love with his twice removed cousin, and since the story does not end sweetly, begins to collect everything his beloved touches, everything that reminds him of her, everything about their happier times. She vanishes, she puts all the objects he collects in almost 35 years in a museum. Museum of Innocence is a real museum I did in Istanbul and opened in 2011. Actually, I thought about opening the museum the day the novel published. The relationship between the museum and the novel would be such that the novel would operate as a sort of an annotated catalogue of the museum, in which annotations are put in such a time sequence that you can also enjoy it like a novel. As it happens in life, I wrote the novel with my regular slow pace. I had the collection, that everything that reminded him of her, but the carpenter never comes on time, the painter is late, so it took another 4 years to open the museum. It was not that I wrote a successful novel and later opened the museum. I conceived and thought about the whole project, a novel operating as a museum, which is not illustrating, but telling the same story with objects many, almost 20 years before, and they opened. Now, finally, after 12 years of the museum working by itself, I'm not putting any money to the museum for the last 10 years. No government, no institution, no foundation is giving us money. The museum works by simple ticket money. I am very happy about that. We'll see if it continues. I hope it continues. It's getting famous, and perhaps because of this fame, I was asked to make a touring exhibition of the museum. The museum has 82 windows, works of art, and representing each chapter of the book. Objects that the characters use, talk about, are in those works of art, in those vitrines. 40 of these vitrines in 2023 are exhibited in Alte Meister galleries in Dresden. This exhibition will go further to Munich Lembe House, then Prague Docks, and perhaps Paris Picasso Museum, from which we all are about to sign a contract. 50 years ago, when I started writing novels, my aim was just to be old-fashioned romantic writers, never be busy with politics, follow my own humors, follow my imagination. 51 years ago, I thought that I will be an architect and a painter like Le Corbusier. My life model was him. But suddenly, I abandoned studying architecture and making pictures. Even I thought that I killed the painter in me. And I began writing novels with the same enthusiasm of a romantic painter. That is, I was only busy in the first 20 years of my writing life. I was only writing for the Turkish audience at the beginning. But after 25 years of writing novels, suddenly I am internationally famous. And my romantic imagination, my dreamy life was interrupted by crude Turkish politics. Now that I am internationally famous, everyone was asking me not only sign petitions, which is nothing, but also comment about Turkey's politics, which put me in trouble, which made me go to court. I'm still living with bodyguards. Do I regret it? in the end, do you regret feeling responsible for others? And also, it's an ethical pressure you have. It's a responsibility, unfortunately, I have to carry on my shoulders. The more reasonable question about this, did it affect the way I write, the way I see the world, the way I represent my stories, the way I look at my stories? In fact, my novel, Snow, is an answer to that. I said to myself, now that I was internationally famous and all the political questions being asked, why don't I write one single political novel? This I said to myself even before writing it, that will answer all the political questions journalists asking. And that book, for a while, my most famous book, unfortunately, and because of that, I am known to be a political writer more than I want and more than I deserve. And Nights of Plague is also partly a political novel. When I finished Snow, I said I will never write a political novel again. And journalists again think that I suffered so much from it. It's not suffering. I did not suffer. So many people suffered and end up in jail. My journalist friends in Turkey, compared to them, my problems are little minor problems. But in the end, in Nights of Plague, I returned to politics, but not to really make a direct comment on what's happening in Turkey, but to be able to write and express what I think about nationalism. The novel is almost an encyclopedic treatment of idea, the existence, the growing development of the idea of nationalism in a small, imaginary Mediterranean island that I invented, which has its own unique, strange language, and the nationality and nation and the identity of that island is based on that imaginary language. We're talking about time and things. And of course, when you say these two words, immediately museums come to mind. What I am interested in, unfortunately, people associate, when we say museum and things, people always associate that with expensive, rich things, like cabinets of curiosities of 16th, 17th century, which were the initial starting point of what we today call museums. But my Museum of Innocence had taught me that you can have a museum in which there are only cheap, mass-produced, common things that we disregard. What makes a museum interesting is that anything, a cigarette butt, a ticket, or just only a simple tissue we just throw away, if put on a pedestal, in a frame, and in a glass, properly, harmoniously, next to other objects, and with the proper light and drama, suddenly it gets a new aura, a new meaning. Museum of Innocence had taught to me the aura of things, that when you pay attention to things and put them in such an order, they almost automatically tell you a story. The composition and making of the Museum of Innocence is about that, and the timelessness of the objects. We gain the feeling of timelessness in a museum. In fact, I talk about Immanuel Kant's two categories. Museums are places where time is transformed to space. As you walk in a museum, you feel an artificial new sense of time, and your body discovers as you move around the objects. It's not the wealth, gold, or particular beautiful qualities of the object, but it is the total whole that makes it interesting. And in that sense, museums are very much like novels, that we get lost in them, we come across little details, but the composition and the whole sense of the thing is the most important part.